Hey guys, it's Jordan here from SwitchWatch. How are you all doing today? Today's review is of SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy. Now if you're new here, don't forget to click that subscribe button to keep up to date with all the latest, greatest Nintendo Switch reviews. Anyways, let's get on with it. When it comes to fighting games, very few companies can boast the same legendary status that SNK have. In the 90s we had Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but SNK pumped out so many classic fighters for their MVS machines in arcades that were the Rolls Royce of video game enthusiasts. With fighting classics such as Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, and The Last Blade, SNK have an almost untouchable legacy. After the arcade scene began to die in the 2000s, the company had to take a backseat after filing for bankruptcy. It has taken a long while, but the famous arcade company are mounting the resurgence of their brand, what with the 40th anniversary collection and the Neo Geo Mini all releasing so close together, as well as making a brand new game, SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy. SNK Heroines does provide a little bit of a story for the reasoning of the crossover, and just like all the crossover fighters that I've reviewed recently, it's top of the line nonsense, but that's to be expected. Your collection of heroines are just that. They are being collected by a perverted shadowy entity who wants all of the girls for himself in his fantasy pocket dimension. By battling away against other fighters and finally taking down Kukri himself, they can allow their freedom. I have recently reviewed BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, which storylines went on for an eternity, then Blade Strangers, which was much more truncated, and now we have SNK Heroines, which is even more streamlined, and I for one can appreciate it. It harkens back to SNK fighters of old, where due to the arcade nature, they wanted you in and out of the game as soon as possible, so cutscenes are mostly kept to one line of utterance from one of your fighters between rounds. There are slightly more lengthier cutscenes every couple of rounds, but since these are the same every single time through, you'll probably be skipping those after the first time that you've played. The one commendable thing about the story for me is that each pair matchup will have their unique little dialogue at the beginning of the story, and then less significantly at the final showdown. So with all the possible combinations between characters, that's a nice amount of effort from the developers, no matter how small the interactions may be. What SNK Heroines does do right for me is that there is a nice little reward for completing the story with each character. During the end credits, a nice little animation will play showing the character you completed it with. It's a little bit nonsensical as you're not entirely sure if this is before or after the events, or even if it's related at all. And only fans of the characters will probably get the references, but it's nice to have a little something to watch for completing the game. I know I keep referencing BlazBlue and Blade Strangers a lot these days and will continue to do so in this review, but that's because I feel that they share a lot of similarities with each other in regards to simplification of the combat. SNK Heroines proudly boasts minimum inputs for special moves, just like the previously mentioned games, and considering they're all coming out at around the same time, it's very relevant. SNK Heroines is a tag fighter, as you can imagine from the title. You choose two of the female fighters to square up against two more fighters. Although it's set up as a 2v2 fighter, it very much feels like a 1v1 still, thanks to the fact that both of your fighters share the same health bar, and if one is knocked out, then you lose the match. You only have a few attacks, 2 normal attacks plus a grab button, as well as a dedicated special attack button. Different moves can be performed by holding a certain direction and then pressing a button, kind of like Smash Brothers and the more recent Blade Strangers. There is a lack of moves though, not every direction is home to a unique attack, which is a shame. What makes SNK Heroines unique and stand out from the rest is the Spirit Gauge and the Dream move. Pulling off your special moves may be pretty easy, but you can't always do them to full effect, as their ability is dictated by your Spirit Gauge, which depletes as you use them and increases as you take a rest. Also of interest is that the more damage you take, the larger your Spirit Gauge becomes. It's an interesting balancing attempt, although I'm not entirely sure how much you will feel it in combat. The major gimmick in SNK Heroines is the Dream finish. This is where the only way you can KO your opponent is by performing a finishing move on them when their health bar is in the red zone. The Dream finish is set to the right shoulder button and can only be performed when your Spirit Gauge is over a certain amount, so winning the fight isn't always quite so simple. Only when these requirements are met can you take down your opponent. Even then it's not guaranteed, as Dream finishes can be avoided and guarded. This is where the game has a very tense nature to it, as you and your opponent race to get their Dream finish out first. While it is all very playable, it does end up feeling a little more stilted than other fighting games. It's just not quite as fluid as other fighters that I played recently. Going between moves as well as guarding just doesn't quite flow right in my opinion. The lack of a duck was also a bit difficult for my reflexes to overcome. It's fine though, and I wouldn't say it's bad, but it lacks what you may be used to from modern fighters. It does feel a little bit older than it actually is. The one thing that I actually didn't like about the fighting was the use of items. They've gone a bit Smash Bros in the fact that items are regularly dropped and can be picked up by hitting them. Your partner currently in the background will then throw them to be used whenever you tilt the right analog stick. These items can range from health potions to bombs and even banana peels in order to add chaos to the match. Now while in Smash Bros, I'm all about the items, and if you don't like playing with items in Smash, then you're just too boring for me. But in SNK Heroines, they just put too much randomness into each round. You don't feel like you've earned the items, and since you're not actually using them for yourself, they are there just to get in the way rather than having fun. Items in Smash are fun, items in SNK Heroines is just not fun. Now you can turn these off in the option menu if you feel the same as I, so I'll give the game credit for that. Now let me talk about the final boss. I don't think it's a spoiler considering it only takes about 20 minutes to get to him in each playthrough. Well, what an absolute cheese monkey this guy is. The blatant cheating that goes on is hilarious. Truly looking back into the arcade days where the computer could read your every input and instantly and impossibly react. Whether it be perfectly blocking 3 finishing moves in a row, getting a health regeneration a millisecond before you pull the trigger on your final move, or I especially love it when as soon as he goes into the danger zone and you're ready to pull off your final move, he turns superhuman and mega combos you down to your danger zone and then conveniently puts you into a stun before then finishing you off himself. It's genuinely funny. Now, he's not impossible by any means. I completed the game with every single character, and sometimes I even beat him on my first try. But just play against him, and you will be in disbelief. And for the record, there are difficulty levels, but I played on the default one. Now, I know most of this review is kind of complaining, but that's because it does have plenty of flaws, and mechanically it just isn't as good as some of its peers. Saying that, despite the average fighting mechanics, I did find myself enjoying playing it. Yes, it wasn't as smooth as Blaze Strangers and lacked some moves, but I had just as much fun playing it. It's a tense game, and playing against a friend makes it even better. I had fun fighting, maybe even more fun than Blaze Blue, even though I will admit that that is a much better fighting game. It's weird, right, how you can like something more than other things, even though you know it's not as good. I'd like to know what games you've liked, even though you know it's not particularly great. Let me know. While the fighting may be fairly average, I like the effort gone into the surrounding elements of the game, like the little unlocks you get from completing the game, the costumes and accessories, the movie clips and so on. These are things that should always be in fighting games these days, but they're often neglected, so I can appreciate them in SNK Heroines. As you fight and win, you'll earn coins which you can use to unlock things for your characters, and upon earning your first 1000 coins, you should immediately head into the customization menu and buy Mai's next costume, which is similar to her standard look. God knows why, but they put Mai, one of the most iconic fighting game females of all time, into a cow costume. Like a cow, really. And some of the other characters do have ridiculous costumes too, which I was happy to change. I'm fine and dandy with bikinis and skimpy stuff, but some things are just downright weird and unappealing here. Some designs just aren't great, so it's nice to be able to revert to more iconic outfits. Visually the game is okay, you can see it's working on a budget though. The animated cutscenes are great, and the arenas are fine enough, pretty much on par with the other competition on the Switch. I think my main problem is with the character models. Sometimes they can look okay, but for the most part I can't help shake the feeling that they look far too plasticky, lacking detail and pretty much coming across like Barbie dolls. It's not great, and it doesn't compare nearly as well to the hand-drawn characters that we often see these days. As far as I'm aware, the game runs very smoothly in both docked and handheld, but it is unfortunately 30 frames per second in both. Now honestly, I did not notice that. I actually thought it was 60 frames per second until I looked into my capture software, which told me that, it was 30. It's not a huge deal, but I know some of you will not like that, so it is worth noting. The audio is fairly fine, but in all honesty, I barely noticed it when playing. I found it very subdued in the mix, and I can't remember a single piece of music from the game. Now that doesn't necessarily make it bad. In fact, I went into the media menu and sampled the music in the game, and it's fine. It's just so lost within everything else. The voice acting is only in Japanese, which you could have probably expected. It's alright, I don't mind it. I know plenty of you can't bear the high-pitched over acting, but it's not that bad. The problem is that most of the characters sound exactly the same, and because characters often don't move their mouths, it can be difficult to know who's actually speaking at that time. For value, SNK Heroines comes in at $49.99 and £39.99, which is on the high end even for a lower budget fighting game. It's more than Blaze Strangers and also more than Blaze Blue's price in the UK, so is it worth the higher price? Well, no it's not. Production values and gameplay don't match the higher price in my opinion, even if I would say that I kind of enjoyed it more, if that makes any sense. I would say definitely wait for a reasonable sale for this one, or go for a physical version which should be cheaper already. Overall, SNK Heroines is a serviceable fighting game. Yes, the mechanics are a little stiff, it's not as smooth as what is also available, but I did actually enjoy myself despite its flaws. It's not as good as a fighting game as Blaze Blue or Blaze Strangers, but I think I enjoyed playing it more even if it's not as good, which is another thing to say. The fighting is okay, but I enjoyed the peripheral content a fair bit with the unlocks and costumes, and it gave me a nice incentive to keep playing. I think if you're looking for a fan service fighting game, then this is a decent option, although I think you should wait for a sale due to its heavy eShop price. 7 out of 10. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed this review of SNK Heroines for the Switch. If you're new here, then click that subscribe button to get plenty more reviews like this one. If you're a regular Switch watcher, then hit that like button and leave a comment below telling us what you think of SNK Heroines. Are you going to be picking it up? Let us know. And finally, head over to the website switchwatch.co.uk. That's well worth a daily look. I've been Jordan from SwitchWatch, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.